Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and I've got another viewer request today, and it is for the 1995 film, The Usual Suspects. Here is your trivia question for today. How does the name Kaiser Soze reveal which criminal is him from the beginning? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So in this story, we meet 5 individual criminals that are all being brought in as suspects for a truck hijacking. And those suspects are Dean Keaton, Michael McManus, Fred Fenster, Todd Hockney, and Roger Verbal Kint. Now, most of this group has not really worked together, but they've heard of each other. But each one of them states that they had nothing to do with this hijacking. After a bit of time, the police realize they have nothing on these guys, so they have to release them. So while these 5 gentlemen were spending time together in the jail, they decided that maybe they should actually work together. We then learn through multiple flashbacks that this journey that the 5 of them go on would eventually take them to a ship which ends up with 27 bodies and only 2 survivors, and one of those survivors is telling the story of what happened. So initially, when they work together, they're doing some jewel smuggling, which causes them to go from New York to California. So at first, everything goes smoothly with their plan, but then it all falls out from underneath them as the 5 of these gentlemen discover that each one of them is connected to an even bigger criminal named Kaiser Soze. Now, with Soze wanting his pound of flesh from each one of them, they end up having to do a job for him. And of course, this eventually leads us back to the ship. So by the end of this story, will the police be able to figure out exactly what happened? Will we find out if any of the others actually did really survive? And will we ever find out more about Kaiser Soze? The director for this film was Bryan Singer. It was written by Christopher McQuarrie, who had previously worked at a detective agency and a law firm and was influenced by these experiences. He even has a brief cameo as one of the police officers at the end of the film. When writing the character of Kaiser Sose, McQuarrie was inspired by a real individual named John List. All of the characters' names in the film are actually from staff members from the law firm and detective agency that McQuarrie worked at. Director Bryan Singer managed to convince all of the 5 main actors that they were all in fact Kaiser Sose, until finally it was revealed by the end of production. There were actually 5 people who played the character of Kaiser Sose. Both Gabriel Byrne and Kevin Spacey did make appearances as the actual character. The actor who appeared as the flashback version of him was actually just a grip on the set. Composer for the film, John Ottman, was the hand lighting the cigarette, and the feet walking at one point were actually director Bryan Singer. Gabriel Byrne was fully convinced that he was Kaiser Sose until he saw the film in theater. The plan from the beginning was to have Kevin Spacey play the character of Verbal, although coming into it, he was hoping to get either the roles of Keaton or Kajan. The character of McManus is played by Stephen Baldwin, but the role almost went to Michael Biehn or Pauly Shore, which that second one, I don't know about that. That doesn't seem right. The unintelligible way that Fenster talks was in fact Benicio del Toro's idea. Also, del Toro must have really wowed them during his audition, as the character of Fenster was originally written with Harry Dean Stanton in mind. Also, if you didn't know this, the reason why all of the actors are laughing during the lineup scene was because Del Toro couldn't stop farting, and they ended up keeping this sequence in the movie anyway. Kevin Pollak plays the character of Hockney, and if you never realize this, they do reveal later in the film that it is Hockney who did the hijacking that all of the characters get brought in for at the beginning of the film. They even allude to this a little bit, as someone does in fact mention that a criminal would be the only person who would be able to sleep after doing a crime, and while they're all in the jail cell, Hockney is the one trying to take a nap. The character of Kajan was originally written with Chaz Palminteri in mind, but at first he wasn't able to join the production, so they started looking at other potential actors, like Christopher Walken, Clark Gregg, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino, but then Palminteri became available and received the role. Of those other potential actors, only Clark Gregg appears in the film, as he is the character of Dr. Walters. The character of Redfoot is played by Peter Green, but there were apparently a lot of other actors up for that role, including Jeff Bridges, Johnny Cash, Chris Cornell, Tommy Lee Jones, Charlie Sheen, James Spader, and Christopher Walken. Here's something else you may not be aware of, but when Peter Green flicks his cigarette into Stephen Baldwin's face, the reaction that Baldwin has is genuine, because it was supposed to get flicked into his chest. There are quite a few well-known actors in the main cast, but here are some supporting actors that I feel also should be pointed out. Giancarlo Esposito, Dan Hedaya, and Pete Postlethwaite. Another interesting sequence is when Kobayashi hands out the folders, he does so in the order that the characters die in. Fenster, Hockney, McManus, Keaton, and then Verbal, who doesn't die. The stolen emeralds in the film were real gemstones that were lent to the production. Probably the most famous line from this film is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. This is not an original quote from the film, it is from the French poet Charles Baudelaire. Just in case you were curious, the name Kaiser Sose is said in different variations 75 times throughout the film, and Dean Keaton is said in different variations 68 times. This movie takes place in California and New York, and that's also where it was filmed. So when it comes to the film The Usual Suspects, I really do enjoy this movie, but I do think it is a bit overrated. The actors themselves do a really good job in the film, but in general, it's not a great movie. The biggest thing really is just that surprise of who Kaiser Soze is, and once that's revealed on any rewatching of the films, a little bit of that magic is lost. So I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 5. Also, one of the most unfortunate things being connected to this film is its director and one of its main actors, as both Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey have had allegations of SA towards them. Now, if you did enjoy The Usual Suspects, other movies I recommend checking out are Fight Club, Reservoir Dogs, The Departed, and Primal Fear. And now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. How does the name Kaiser Soze reveal which criminal is him from the beginning? In the film, it's said that Kaiser Sose has a Turkish mother and a German father. Kaiser Sose in those languages can be roughly translated to King Blabbermouth, which at one point it is explained in the film, Verbal got his name because he talks too much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.